Yeah, sure. Let me go over to you. I have a little loud. Shoot me an email and I'll fix it. Thanks. It was probably just like I click a calendar and I probably just clicked the wrong day. Thank you for noticing that. I'm gonna go ahead and open this. If you get too cold, let me know. But Dr. Burrow's actually done air quality readings in here, and if you open the windows, it gets better. I like them too cold. So not only does it look tough for viruses, but like, we probably should just have that good air quality all the time for like our own physical health.
Adam.
Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started. We're gonna start with an activity today. The genderbread person, which is a way to help conceptualize all these concepts I threw at you on Wednesday. So let me go ahead and get into our slideshow just so I can turn on the good captions. And actually, let me do a new share so that our folks who are on Zoom will be able to see the video. And I'm just going to take a quick sec to check everybody in. So I'll look at the folks who are here on Zoom and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we've got Mia and Deja and Nora, Abby, Monica. Didn't think so. Double checking. Alrighty, and Sarah Ellis. Awesome. Miriam. Morning. Lauren. And Micaiah's not here. Lyric. Awesome. Like if you notice now my head actually goes to where you sit, but I want to double check. India, I know sometimes she is over here. Doesn't look like it. Jalen's not here. Daria just signed onto the Zoom. Good morning. Heaven is here. Sydney. All right, no Alex. Linda is on Zoom. Jenna is not here. Sequoia, I think usually sits up here. And then Grayson. Okay, I'm probably 2/3 of the way there, but I don't want to F up. So I'm gonna keep using my crutch. So thank you for your patience with me. So today, we're gonna do an activity to try to bring into focus and better explanation a lot of those terms I threw at you on Wednesday. So we're going to start by watching a video about this concept of the genderbread person. So I'm going to turn the lights off to feel a little better.
Let's unpack this whole gender conversation. You use a device or a character called the genderbread man.
Person.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. The genderbread person.
It's okay. I found it really helpful to think about gender in a few different distinct categories. Gender identity, how you define your gender and how you see yourself. Gender expression, the different ways that we present or perform gender through our actions, our dress, and our demeanor. And biological sex or anatomical sex, the physical characteristics that make up our body that in many people's minds equal gender, but don't.
So gender expression is the way you present yourself to the world. So you could be talking about the way you dress.
Yeah.
The way you comb your hair.
Or don't.
Or use product.
Yeah.
So everything kind of as it relates to the outside world,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I mean, that's a perfect way of thinking about it. So even just, okay, so this is funny. The way that I'm sitting right now is a very feminine expression of sitting, because like how we sit is gendered, right?
And meanwhile, I'm kind of man-spreading.
Yeah, you're man-spreading. You're not even giving me enough room to properly man-spread over here. This is the man cross, the masculine way of crossing a leg. This is just uncomfortable for me. Feels like so much.
It feels good to me.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like yoga. Okay, now let's do the girl.
Okay.
So gender is different than sexual orientation.
Yeah.
But a lot of people get them confused.
Yeah. Gender is who you go to bed as. Sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. So if you haven't heard that one's important.
So let's talk about penises and vaginas, shall we?
Yeah, we might as well.
Let's just go right there.
If you haven't already talked about penises and vaginas, we need to talk about penises and vaginas, because that's what everybody always thinks. Like immediately, as soon as you say gender, anybody who's walking by right now who's hearing us say the word gender, the first thing that's popping into their mind is external genitalia. They're thinking about penises and vaginas.
So, for the purpose of our discussion, the bottom line is your external genitalia does not dictate your gender.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Can you rewind that? The bottom line is your external genitalia does not dictate your gender.
Yeah. I mean, that I couldn't have said it better.
All right, and I know y'all are more aware of these things than people even in my generation, and certainly people in, say, my parents' generation, but I still think it's helpful to kind of break some of it down sometimes.
Let's unpack this whole.
All righty. So in terms of this genderbread person, and I thought I had photocopied. There it is. Okay, they're out of order. There we go. So this is that diagram that he was showing. The idea that your gender identity, your attraction to other people, your sex, and this one actually adds expression as something that's potentially different. But your gender identity is basically how you feel in your mind, what makes sense to you in terms of how you identify. So again, this graphic's called the genderbread person, and it helps us sort of understand what we mean when we say gender or sex or that kind of thing. Sex is those external genitalia, also internal genitalia. Also, we think about DNA, X and Y, right? But as we talked about the other day, sometimes that is even not as sort of clear cut as we think. And then attraction is who you want to be with, right? And it doesn't have to be purely sexual, but that's sort of your heart. And then the expression often comes from your identity, where you are going to be presenting yourself in a masculine, feminine, or maybe sort of genderqueer, gender fluid way, right?
Let's unpack this whole.
Every single time. Okay, so these are what goes under that, and these are the sort of scales of gender expression and sexual attraction, romantic attraction. And so one of the things I want you to notice, and this is something we've known since the 70s when we really started doing research at first on sort of masculinity, femininity, identifying as male versus female, is that it's not two ends of the same spectrum. They're two different things. So you can be high in identifying with womanness, but also be high in identifying with manness. Yeah, it's weird to say it that way, maleness, manness. But you can be low on either. You can kind of go either direction on either. Gender expression, again, is that femininity, masculinity, how you're portraying yourself. And honestly, gender expression can even kind of vary by the day, right? Like there are days that I am super girly, and there are days where I'm sort of more playing with masculinity. I have some shirts that go with like ties and things like that. Today's pretty feminine. I got flowers on my jeans. I'm wearing heels, right? I'm wearing what I'm affectionately calling my N95 hair, which is the easiest hair to wear with my mask. So you guys see it a lot. And then anatomical sex. Again, you can have, let's say, you look at someone external genitalia and it looks entirely masculine. And then you look at someone's internal genitalia and it's entirely feminine. And again, this doesn't have to be someone who's trans and has had any kind of surgery. There are people who are born with a penis, but also have a uterus, right? And so again, these are rare, but not that rare, about the percentage of redheads. So identity is not the same as expression, is not the same as sex. And as I said in the video, your gender is not your sexual orientation, right? So with sexual orientation, you can also look at sexual attraction, or what we might commonly call lust, and compare that to romantic attraction. So are you sexually attracted to female people, masculine people, and same thing for romantically? I would argue that they could even expand this and include more gender non-binary, trans, gender fluid people as its own arrow, right? So if you are, completely bisexual, you might be high on both of these. Or there are people who are bisexual who might be more attracted to women, still attracted to men, but not as much, right? But they would still identify as bisexual. So what I'm gonna have y'all do, and it's not a handout, you don't have to turn it in, this is just for you, and folks on Zoom, you can do it too, is go ahead and if you want to draw a little person, you can, right? So think about your identity, your sexual orientation, your gender expression, your biological sex. And think about, in terms of your gender identity, where are you mapping on sort of the male to female? And actually, this is probably going to be more helpful so y'all can see the anchors, but sort of think about it for yourself. If you had to draw an X on each of these for yourself, right? Where would you be? And so again, I'm going to give you 4 or 5 minutes to do this. This is for you. This is to help you kind of sort this out. And then if anyone wants to share, you can, but certainly no one's going to be obligated to share. And if my head's in anyone's way, just let me know. Just real quick checking that I've got everybody who is on Zoom. Yeah, one extra person. Alrighty. See a lot of people look like they're about done. If you're not, you can keep working on it. But rather than disclose your own personal attractions, let's just sort of start with a conversation about what was it like completing this? Was this a different way than you thought about things? Had you already kind of pushed things through this way before? What do folks think?
Yeah, I guess for me it's a little bit weird because like I definitely identify as a female, but I tend to dress very like
Yeah.
not female. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was like interesting.
I totally get it. If you guys saw me on the weekend, I'm that way too. I'm just, jeans and t-shirts and, nothing's form fitting. Yeah.
So is it not like I just don't I guess the part I'm not getting is where it's like and like I get how we identify as whatever we want, and I agree with that, but then I don't get how we like categorize certain clothes and sitting and stuff. I just don't get where the boundary is.
That's a legitimate question. Yeah, and a lot of that is sort of societally defined, and some of that has changed over the years. One of my favorite stories related to that is actually that the color pink, which we associate with being very feminine now, until the early 1900s was considered a masculine color. And they dressed little boys in it because it was considered a soft version of red, and red was a very masculine color, and then somehow it switched. So yeah, these things change over time, which is why it's kind of hilarious, and people are like, we've always done it this way, like no, we haven't. But yeah, it's, what is masculine, what is feminine, who gets to decide, right? Who gets to decide that I'm like presenting as more masculine one day when I just like didn't feel like getting dressed up, right? Exactly. Well, and I'll give you another example. So my initial thought when I had my baby was I'm gonna dress them gender neutral. I'm gonna dress them all in like not pink or blue, somewhere in between. That is impossible given how baby stores are set up. Like you can find a few things, but they're almost always in the boys section, right? That's where the gender neutral stuff is. And so what we quickly switched to was having her dress more gender fluid. So like some days she'll be in, cargo shorts with sharks on them. And the next day she'll be in, a dress with flamingos on it. And, she's 4, so she can make her own decisions. And she's in a like, everything has to be a dress, which is interesting for, a feminist mother, but I wear a lot of dresses too, so I can't really judge. But we've spent a lot of time to find dresses that are more fun and like kind of express her interest more. So like she has dresses with sharks on them because those are her favorite animals and things like that. But the fact that that's out of the ordinary and that like we have this idea that's often portrayed that like girls, women are like gentle, delicate, right? And then men, boys are manly. I love that. Like for girls and women, larger sizes are like plus size, and for boys, they're husky, right? Like it's just sort of hilarious. Or it's like big and tall for big and tall. There we go. For grown men. So yeah, it's like a weird gender convention, and it obviously like changes as trends change. Yeah, and just in like a lot of that stuff, we don't even realize we're learning it. There's like a type of learning called social learning that you may remember from if you took 101 at any point or overall intrasite class, where we just learn by watching other people. So things like how we sit and things along those lines are often just learned by watching other people. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about, sort of how do these gender traditions and conventions come into play. It makes me think of another thing. So, kind of like people binge their old favorite TV shows. I've been rewatching Try Guys videos. That's like my downtime lately. And there's an old one where they were wearing women's pants, and they were talking about the history of why women's pants often don't have pockets.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's real annoying, right? And so when women dressed very voluminously with all those overskirts and everything, they would have pockets and have like giant pockets. And then when the silhouette changed, and it became sort of the Bridgerton era, like Empire Waist straight down, you couldn't hide pockets anymore. So they started making these purses they called reticules at that point in time. Well, then people figured out you can make money by selling purses, right? So that was a sort of thing. The suffragettes, who were the ones who fought to get women the right to vote, they purposely put pockets in their clothes as like a form of protest. And then like now it's coming back around. But it's just sort of interesting to think about the weird ways that fashion and gender norms and capitalism a lot of the time has made these decisions.
I literally buy them because they have pockets.
Yep. Yeah, I go out of my way. Those of you, some people noticed in one of my other classes that like they're like, you always pockets. I'm like, I try. You know, I like go out of my like when I search a dress on Amazon, it's like such a joke with pockets.
Like does it have
Exactly. Like even that peacock maxi dress that has pockets. Like, yeah, because it's annoying, and especially now that I'm a mom and I'm always running after her. Like it's not very helpful to run around with your phone in your hand, right? So, you know, throwing it in a pocket is much easier. But yeah, it's really interesting to think about. And obviously, for a whole host of reasons, let's say you're biologically, based on external genitalia, someone would identify you as male. But based on gender identity in your brain, you identify as a woman, right? It's possible you would not dress as a woman for a whole host of reasons. Some might just be social norms. Some might be, maybe you don't like the traditional femininity and all these crazy norms that we've just been talking about. Or maybe it's unsafe for you to do that based on where you live, right? So yeah, it's a fun mix of things that goes way beyond sort of the this or that we tend to see popularized. And again, I love that your generation is like figuring this out pretty quick. All right, so as I mentioned Wednesday, I've got some fun old ads for us to look at. So when you think about how the two genders are portrayed in mass media, TV, magazines, YouTube ads, which are the only ads I ever see anymore, what do you all think? What do you think of when you think of what is masculine, what is feminine, how are women portrayed, how are men portrayed?
ads when they're always sexualized?
Yes, very, very sexualized, right? And oftentimes nothing to do with the product. And I've
they'll
heard,
be eating a burger going forward.
right, yeah, who is it?
Who eats a burger?
Carl's Jr., right? And I think they're the same company as Hardee's, which we have here. Yeah. Yeah, and for men, they're often very masculinized, I think, yep. And like, you know, if there's any kind of emotion, they're made fun of, things like that. Like a few years ago, there was a Super Bowl ad. It was a great Super Bowl ad, actually. But it really played on this, where it was like they were playing, you know, football in the backyard, and they had Betty White playing football, and they were like, eat a Snickers, and then turned into this guy. It's like, oh, you act like you're not yourself when you're not, like, you weren't being manly enough. Yeah, exactly. Like, so yeah, there's all these stuff, and like media is often fueled by advertisers, even if it's not an ad itself. And so again, a lot of this goes back to who's making money off of it, right? Which is weird to think about. All right, so just real quick, some ideas about stereotyping in the media that we can think about as we look at these ads coming up here. So function ranking is one of the things to think about. So who is doing things? Who is there just to be looked at? Who is having things done to them, right? So who is performing functions? And then relative size. So sometimes this is just having really short women and really tall guys. Sometimes it's like perspective, like who's put in the foreground, who's put in the background, or how they're shot, or the men is sort of like towering over the woman. The ritualization of subordination. So this is exactly what we're talking about with women being objectified, the idea that got to somehow like put women in their place. And some of these ads we're going to look at are disturbing on that factor, just to like give you a heads up. The feminine touch is the idea that like women can magically make things better. Women are magically moms and like make houses clean. And it's almost like the bewitched thing, right? Like we can all just wiggle our nose and everything's perfect. Like, we wish, right? And then emphasizing family as well. And so again, I'm starting with some older ads. So here we have, you know, feminization. This was for a bottle of ketchup that was easier to open. You mean a woman can open it? Right? Yeah, it's a lot. And like, again, look at the sexualization that slips in. Like there's a reason her lips are painted bright red and they're in that position next to a phallic object, right? Subordination, keep her where she belongs. I guess by giving her nice shoes that she can only admire by laying on the ground.
Oh, I was thinking of kicking your wife.
I mean, there's certainly elements of that too, right? For sure, yeah, yeah. The chef does everything but cook. That's what wives are for. And this is really interesting dynamic, right? So women in the home are traditionally associated with cooking, but in the world of professional cooking, it's often men who are in executive chef positions, right? And I think it took, oh gosh, I want to say like 10 seasons of Top Chef before they had a female chef win.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I know they've had several female winners. But there's this idea that I think, again, is like ingrained in people's mind that somehow being a chef is superior to a cook. And somehow that's masculine because you're doing it in this functional way outside the house. And this, you know, when you're cooking, that's different. And again, it's absurd, right? To think that things that are even traditionally in women's domain being sort of seen as like, no, outside of the house, you can't do that. I don't know about y'all, but if someone gave me a vacuum for Christmas, unless it was for like, we'll do house presents sometimes, like we needed a new microwave a few years back, so that was a present for the house, right? Not for either of us. Yeah, I'd be kind of ticked off. This is my big Christmas present for a year, right? But this is the idea, is that women are supposed to, again, be really into cleaning house and whatnot. And just like an interesting side note psychologically, so around this era, the 50s and 60s, there's a lot of really interesting, again, history and context. So when World War II was happening in the 40s, a lot of women moved into the workforce because the men were all off fighting, right? So women were working factory jobs. This is where Rosie the Riveter came in. And then when the men came back, the women were expected to just sort of like go back to being homemakers and be happy about it. Around this time, women also like started to get more college educated. But the expectation for a lot of women was you were going to get what they called your MRS degree, your Mrs. degree, you were going to find a husband. And so a lot of women were college educated or trained in these, you know, skills like factory workers, and then expected to just stay home. So there, yeah, so psychologically, you can imagine this is really problematic for a lot of women during this time. At this time, doctors like couldn't figure out why all these women had depression and anxiety. So they actually started prescribing a lot of them Valium, which is a really heavy duty anti-anxiety pill. It's also very addictive. And to the point that they started calling it Mother's Little Helper. Yeah, very disturbing. And so this really, to me, comes out of that. That's like, oh yeah, she'll be happy with a vacuum. That's what women are supposed to be happy with. Is it always illegal to kill a woman? It's like, what the hell are you even trying to advertise here? I think it's the toaster, right? But it's this idea that women be frustrating, right? And they're dumb and men have to try to explain things to them. And or they're picky. You know, kind of resonates to me a little bit, strangely, with like the idea of the friend zone in today's day and age. Like, women are too picky. There's all these nice guys out there. And it's like, you know, like all people have their own preferences, as we just went over. And, you know, you can't get mad at someone for just not being attracted to you. It's just not how it works. This was a series about, I want to say in the late 90s, early 2000s, when they used to just advertise milk. This was the whole thing when I was growing up. And so this was, some study had come out that said that milk could reduce the symptoms of PMS. And so I'm sorry for the things, or the things I did or didn't do. We could both blame myself. I'm sorry I listened to what you said and not what you meant. And so the idea here is reinforcing not only that like hormonal women are unreasonable, but also that guys like don't know what to do when women be hormonal, right? So it's insulting to all genders, right? And again, the idea that this is why a lot of people still argue we shouldn't have women leaders. Oh, what if they are hormonal and they just start a war? Right? Like one of my favorite segments on that, I don't know if anyone's ever watched Jordan Klepper on The Daily Show. They send him out to like Trump rallies to talk to people. And a woman was saying that, and he was like, but haven't all wars to this point been started by men? And she was kind of like, well, you got me there. You know, it's like people hadn't really like thought through these things. So these things have implications for folks. Yeah, here's where we start to get into sexualization. So this is an ad for a beer. But the beer's way down here. And the first thing I noticed was her big mouth, but her head is not even in the picture. This is a really common trope in advertising where they're actually unfortunately doing it a lot to people of all genders now, but particularly women just like won't have a head. It's easier to objectify someone, turn them into an object if you don't have to recognize their humanity, right? So again, using women's bodies to sell things. This movie came out, I want to say while I was on my internship year, my residency, and we were like 4 women and a guy, and our male intern, he's great. He was like good old boy from South Georgia, and even he was like, this movie looks awful, right? So yeah, just the idea, right? But it was a real movie, believe it or not, that came out. It was called I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. But yeah, just this idea that like misogyny is cool and like woke people just need to be punished, things along those lines. I'm actually watching a docuseries on Netflix right now about something really similar. It's called The Most Hated Man on the Internet. And it's about this website called Is Anybody Up? Which was like the original revenge porn website. And the guy was just like callous about it. He literally said in interviews, like, they're not people to me. They're just characters. They're just objects on my website. Yeah, that's problematic, right? So here's where we start to get into some of that, again, really disturbing submission imagery, right? And this is a high fashion ad. And so, you know, again, somehow this is supposed to make you want to go buy the lingerie she's wearing. And it's not unique. We obviously have racism that's brought into this as well, right? So the idea of women being submissive, sort of a BDSM flair, and again, playing on the idea of the geisha and other Asian stereotypes. Advertising for TV, right? His hand around her throat, the chalice spilling something red, like carefully placed in front of her sort of vulvar area is on purpose, right? So again, normalizing violence, normalizing this idea that it's okay and maybe sexy to try to act with violence towards other people, particularly people of marginalized genders. It's a Jimmy Choo ad. So now we're all the way to like this person is a body, right? But go buy the shoes. And then we get to ones that are more sort of just playing with stereotypes, right? So like the guy's playing football, but she's making a cake and she's a cheerleader, right? So again, just like who gets to be doing the thing that is valued? I would argue that football is very valued in America, right? I don't know if anyone's been following the Cleveland Browns this season, but if you're not familiar with it, I know this because my husband is originally from Cleveland. So their like big recruit that they got is accused of multiple instances of sexual assault. And they were just sort of like, nah, he can play football well. So like my husband's just not engaging this year with the Browns because of it. But there are multiple cases of that. There was the horrific caught on video of the football player just knocking his wife out in the elevator a few years back. And he got fewer game suspensions than did the guy who was dogfighting. I mean, not that I don't think we should punish people for dogfighting, right? But like, let's treat women at least as equal as dogs, right? Like people, right? And so I think that that's a big piece of this, is to think about like, what is valued and how is that portrayed? And how does that get into people's heads?
The fact that we're not equal to dogs.
Right? It's problematic.
That's problematic in and of itself.
Right. And there are certain things, I think, within how we're socialized as humans that like animals pull on us in a different way. Like, I don't know if anyone else had this experience, but like when I saw the images of like the corgis watching Queen Elizabeth's coffin go by, or they had her pony, like her horse that she'd had for years, also watching, like that touched me weirdly in a way that some of the other stuff didn't. But like, it's still like, I still respect that, even though she was a problematic part of colonization, right? She was a leader for a really long time, and we need to acknowledge all of her good and bad attributes and really bring that into play. Again, the idea that like men can't take care of themselves, so they need women to do it. And this is the extreme version of this. This is for life insurance. Imagine a world without her. Like, what would you do if you had to parent? This is like a little ludicrous to people my age. I'm an older millennial, an elder millennial, an Oregon Trail generation. And we tend to be much more likely to co-parent. But generations before ours it's literally, well, if the dad is hanging out with the kids, he'll say he's babysitting, which is just dumb. Or like my dad and my father-in-law have told my husband, like, I don't think I ever changed a diaper. And I'm like, I'm a bitch. Like, especially when I was in my postpartum state, I would have been like, you are getting over it and you are helping, right? Probably shouldn't go around quoting that Dr. Mara said she would cut a bitch, but you know, it's the truth. I have a friend who, she was like, I didn't get postpartum anxiety or depression, I got postpartum rage. And at one point when her alarm went off and she had to breastfeed, she like threw the clock at her husband because he didn't have breasts, so he couldn't breastfeed. And she was like, I knew it was irrational, right? But you just get irrational when you're sleep deprived. But again, just this implication that men somehow are incompetent at family things because it's the women's purview. And we see this a lot too, right? The idea that like the person who's going to be doing the meal planning and taking care of the kids and grocery shopping is always going to be the mom, right? And again, in modern times, I think that that's not always true. My husband generally does most of the grocery shopping because he likes cooking. I can cook, but it's not fun for me. But I will also obviously, like, we need something, I'm going to stop at Lidl, I'm going to run out to Trader Joe's, things along those lines. But the idea in our society that we still see a lot is that this is the woman's job. Here we are back to objectification. So Wonder Bra was a big thing again in like the late 90s when it first came out. It was the first like extreme push-up bra. And so this is like kind of in like well, if I can't do traditional feminine things, that's okay because you can just look at me, right? Again, I would love to know what she does for her job when she has her shirt on, right? This is, actually, I don't actually know what this is advertising now that I think about it. I've used this ad for years, but yeah, it looks like Barbie's, but it's, I think, maybe the drink or maybe a entertainment site or something.
Well, consider this as play with yourself.
Right. I mean, maybe it's sex toys. I don't know. But literally have turned women into objects, right? Turn them into Barbies that cannot control themselves, have to be moved around by other people. And we see this repeated a lot in modern advertising. The idea that like men want to control women like they would a video game. Keep on dreaming of a better world. And then again, just sexualizing women in unnecessary ways. These are graphic tees. And the dudes all get to wear them, but the women are naked just holding them. Like women can put t-shirts on. Again, like novel concept, right? This one is for lingerie. And I suspect you didn't even notice the Tyrannosaurus Rex down here in the corner. Again, objectifying. I mean, yeah, I guess if you want to have someone buy your lingerie, you need them to show their lingerie. But like, I don't know about y'all, but like when I'm getting ready in the morning, I'm not walking around in 6'6" heels.
Well, she might be not getting ready.
That is true. She could be getting ready for fun times.
What's still not wearing 6-inch heels?
No, I don't. I have like one pair of 6-inch heels. I believe I've worn them once and was like,
I
not
don't
good.
heels. I don't either, but I think everyone's different.
Yeah, everyone's different. I wore heels a lot more before the pandemic, and then the first year of the pandemic, because I have a lot of risk factors. I taught from home, which meant I was usually like wearing Triceratops slippers, and then I got really into more comfy shoes after that for some reason. So, but yeah, here this is for vodka. Very clearly meant to be very sexualized.
Oh,
Yeah. American Apparel as a company has really interesting dynamics in terms of how they treat all employees regardless of gender. Like you're photographed and it goes to the CEO and he approves whether you're hot enough to work at their stores. Like that's the main criteria. Abercrombie used to be this way too. There's another, I believe, Netflix documentary called White Hot about Abercrombie. Really interesting. Let's glamorize police brutality. Yeah, no, right? Oh, and then we love to make fun of women for being overweight. As this is a Slim Fast ad, and it says, need to lose a little weight before your wedding. And if you can't see, the groom is sinking into the cake. This is my least favorite ad ever, because it looks like a glamorous gang rape, right? Very problematic. And again, trying to sell clothes. This was like supposed to be a play on words and being like, women are people, blah, 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 blah. But it says, why should women read The Economist? They shouldn't. And then it says, accomplished, influential people should read us. People like you. And they were trying to say women could too, but like out of context, it's just like, what? This was an ad campaign for Molson, where they put this ad in women's magazines and this ad in men's magazines. And the idea was they were brainwashing women into wanting Molson because they put it with puppies and a hot guy. This one says, can you solve one of our puzzles? Can you explain it to your mom? And someone has put a sticky note that says, my mom has a PhD in math. Right, so again, this implication that mothers wouldn't understand anything knowledgeable, and particularly not anything in science, technology, engineering, or math, right? Again, the overbearing woman, we're all children on Mother's Day. This one, same sort of message. solve all kinds of problems. And the hammer is, matched up with this older woman's head. I remember seeing this ad back in the late 90s. So this is Mark McGrath from Sugar Ray. I don't remember the mom's name because she was always objectified. So there you go. And strategically placed space shuttle. Also, this is what computers legitimately used to look like back then. And there's also obviously racial things that go into this. This is on purpose. They purposely tried to replicate this image when they did this cover with LeBron James. So now we're equating a very accomplished Black man with an ape.
Did he know that he was saying that?
Yeah, I'm guessing.
That's racist.
But yeah, racism can be internalized, or maybe he just thought it would look cool, right? But yeah, like any sort of discrimination, racism, sexism, homophobia can be internalized, and then you engage with the culture for these reasons. Alrighty, we're going to start doing a whole bunch of discussion questions, and I think it's going to be good to do those all in one chunk. So I'm going to let y'all out a little bit early. You can get your weekend started a whole 4 minutes early. Very exciting. But yeah, I'm going to really try hard to have your exams graded by Monday. So if not, Wednesday at the latest. Have a good weekend, Zoom folks.